There is a watch sitting on a dealer's shelf right now that retailed for $28,500. He paid $24,000 for it 18 months ago, convinced it was going up. He will take 22 today. He is not telling you that. He is telling you it is priced to move. The difference between those two numbers is 3 years of a market correction that has turned the most exciting watch category in living memory into the most overstocked one. The Bloomberg Subdial Watch Index is down 42% from its April 2022 peak. 10 consecutive quarters of decline. What follows is not a list of bad watches. It is a list of watches that dealers bought at prices the market will not support anymore. And exactly what those watches are actually worth in 2026. Number 1. Panerai Luminor. The brand that numbered itself into irrelevance. Here is the Panerai problem in a single statistic. The brand's reference numbering system, the PAM number that collectors use to identify specific models, has now passed 1,200. PAM 1200, 1,200 distinct references in a catalog that was built on the premise that these watches were rare objects produced in small numbers for people who knew something the general market did not. Rolex, the largest luxury watch manufacturer in the world, maintains a catalog of 12 collections. Panerai has 1,200 PAM numbers. The math of that comparison does not require elaboration. The collector base that drove Panerai prices in the early 2000s valued the brand specifically because of scarcity. Because owning a pre-Richemont piece meant you had found something that most buyers could not identify or acquire. When the catalog expanded past the point where any individual collector could meaningfully track what Panerai was producing, the original value proposition disappeared. What remained was a watch with a distinctive design language, genuine Italian Navy provenance, and a market position that had been disrupted by its own manufacturer, PAM 1200. For context, Panerai was producing roughly 40 references per year when it was considered one of the most desirable watch brands on the planet in the early 2000s. The Richemont acquisition accelerated production. New PAMs launched at a pace that the original collector base could not absorb and did not want to. Each new reference was positioned as a fresh expression of Italian Navy DNA. What each new reference actually was, from the secondary market's perspective, was additional supply competing with existing supply that was already struggling to find buyers at the prices dealers had paid for it. The watch chart's Panerai Luminor Market Index has declined 21.4% over 5 years. The PAM 01312, one of the most liquid mainstream Luminor references, has dropped 21.7% over the same period and now trades at approximately $4,793. Retail for equivalent current production runs between $8,000 and $9,000. That gap is not a discount. It is the market's verdict on what happens when a brand that built its reputation on genuine scarcity decides that the path forward is volume. There is a useful thought experiment here. If you know nothing about Panerai's history, if you have never heard the Stallone story, never heard about the Italian Navy commissions, never heard about the pre-Richemont rarity, and someone shows you a 44mm crown-protecting device, sandwich dial watch with in-house movement architecture at $5,000 on the secondary market, is it interesting? The answer is yes. That watch, at that price, in a world where its mythology has been diluted, is still a genuinely distinctive piece of Swiss-Italian engineering, with a design language that nothing else in its category replicates. The dealer who bought at $8,000 and needs to move at $6,000 is not your problem. The watch at $5,000 is. There is also a service consideration worth knowing. Panerai movement service at intervals of 5 years, with costs running approximately $800 to $1,500 depending on reference and complexity, roughly 15 to 20% of the current secondary market price for a mainstream Luminor. That ratio is reasonable and comparable to what equivalent Swiss movements cost to service. The movement architecture inside the Luminor, with its long power reserve and winding crown protection, was designed specifically for reliability in conditions where servicing was not always immediately possible. That design philosophy did not change when the PAM number passed 1,000. The watch that was built to work in the field still works in the field. The collector community that originally valued it for that reason has not disappeared. It has been priced out or disillusioned by the reference proliferation. At current market levels, both of those groups may find their way back to a watch that, underneath the PAM number debate, still makes a genuine case for itself. The Panerai Luminor also represents one of the most distinctive wearing propositions available at current secondary market prices. 44mm is genuinely large. It is not large in the way that some modern sports watches are large, proportionally inflated for visual presence. It is large in the way that instruments are large, because the function requires the size. The dial needs to be legible in conditions where legibility matters. The crown protection device needs space to work mechanically. The sandwich construction of the dial, with its luminous material visible through the cutouts in the top plate, produces a legibility in darkness that no other watch in this price category matches. At $5,000 on the secondary market, the Panerai Luminor is not a diminished version of what it was at $8,500 in a boutique. It is the same object. The dealer's loss is the occasion for the acquisition. The occasion does not change what is being acquired. Number 2. IWC Portugieser chronograph. The watch whose upgrade made it cheaper. IWC did something unusual with the Portugieser chronograph a few years ago. They replaced the Valjoux-based caliber that had powered it for years with a new in-house movement. The 69,000 series, IWC developed, column wheel actuated, running at 28,800 vibrations per hour. This was a genuine improvement. In-house movements cost more to develop and typically justify higher retail prices. IWC raised the retail price of the Portugieser chronograph to reflect the upgrade. The reference 371605 now retails at $8,900. The secondary market responded to this sequence of events with complete indifference to the argument IWC was making. Watch Charts data shows the 371605 currently trading at $5,026. A discount of 43.5% from the retail price that was supposed to reflect the better movement. In production, IWC Portugieser watches trade on average 32.8% below retail. That number has been consistent across years, across movement generations, across marketing campaigns. It is structural. The Portugieser chronograph is a watch that the secondary market has decided is worth approximately half of what IWC asks for it at the boutique, regardless of what IWC does to justify the asking price. This creates a straightforward situation for the buyer who understands what they are looking at. At $5,000, the Portugieser chronograph is not competing against $8,000 Swiss watches. It is competing against $5,000 Swiss watches. And at $5,000, it wins almost every comparison it enters. The design has genuine horological lineage going back to 1939. The movement is now in-house and legitimately accomplished. The dial architecture, large subsidiary seconds, restrained case, the particular legibility that comes from designing a watch around the movement inside it rather than around what looks good in a display case, is exactly what a serious watch person describes when asked what a proper dress chronograph should look like. The dealer's distress is not your concern. The watch at the market price is a different proposition than the watch at the boutique price. At the market price, it is an exceptional one. One more detail worth understanding. IWC's service network covers the Portugieser with the same infrastructure it applies to every watch it produces. Service intervals run 5 to 7 years, with costs for the chronograph caliber in the range of $1,000 to $1,800 at authorized service centers. On a watch acquired at $5,000, that is a manageable long-term ownership proposition. The movement IWC installed is designed to run accurately for decades with proper care. The service costs are predictable. The design is not going to age into irrelevance. It has been essentially unchanged for 30 years, for the same reason that genuinely resolved designs do not need changing. The buyer who acquires a Portugieser chronograph at current market pricing and wears it for 10 years is paying approximately $6,000 total for the watch and its first service. For a genuine in-house Swiss chronograph with that history and that design, that number is difficult to argue against at any serious level. It is also worth noting that IWC's service network is genuinely excellent and global. Regardless of where you are, service for a Portugieser is accessible, documented, and executed to consistent standards. The movement upgrade that widened the secondary market discount has also made the watch easier and more economical to maintain long-term because in-house parts are more reliably available than externally sourced caliber components. The dealer's frustration is a feature for the buyer who knows where to look. Number 3. Cartier Santos. The watch that invented the category nobody buys it in. The Cartier Santos is responsible for the existence of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. This is not an interpretive claim. It is a documented design lineage. When Audemars Piguet commissioned Gerald Genta to design the Royal Oak in 1971, Genta was working within a design vocabulary that Cartier had established 67 years earlier. The Santos's square case, integrated bracelet, exposed hardware on the bezel. These were not radical innovations in 1971. They were references to an existing tradition. Genta adapted, refined, and made them his own. But the template existed. It came from the Santos. The same is true of the Nautilus, which Genta designed for Patek Philippe in 1976. The porthole inspiration, the horizontal grooves, the integrated bracelet, all of it developed from a visual language the Santos had introduced to wristwatch design in 1904. These are not watches that occasionally reference the Santos. They are watches that would not exist without it. The Cartier Santos is responsible for the existence of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. It is responsible for the Patek Philippe Nautilus. It is responsible for the Tissot PRX, the Bulgari Octo, and every other watch that uses an integrated bracelet and a case designed for function as well as form. In 1904, Louis Cartier made a wristwatch for Alberto Santos Dumont because pocket watches were impractical in the cockpit of an early aircraft. The design decisions made for that watch, square case, exposed bezel screws, bracelet flowing directly from the lugs, established the visual grammar of luxury sports watchmaking that the entire industry has been working within ever since. Gerald Genta, who designed both the Royal Oak and the Nautilus, was working in a tradition that Cartier had established 70 years earlier. The Santos is the origin of a category that now generates billions of dollars in annual sales for brands that do not make the Santos. The Santos itself trades at 23.1% below retail on average, according to WatchChart's data. The Santos Medium in steel, reference WSSA0029, retail $8,400, has a current market value of $6,686, a 20.4% discount on the watch that created the design language every premium brand has spent decades imitating. There is something structurally strange about this. The Royal Oak, which owes its existence to the Santos, commands premiums above retail for steel references. The Nautilus, which owes its existence to the Santos, peaked at 5 times retail at auction. The watch that preceded and inspired both of them trades at a discount. The explanation is partly collector psychology. The Santos has never fully shed the fashion watch association that comes from being sold in Cartier boutiques alongside jewelry, and partly the reality that Cartier's collector community has not reached the density that supports premium secondary market pricing. Both of those things can change. The design is not the problem. The watch made the category. It can make a collector base. At current market prices, you are acquiring that design history at the steepest discount available to anyone who understands what it represents. The Santos also benefits from something that most watches at this price point do not, the quick-switch strap system that Cartier introduced in the 2018 relaunch. The mechanism allows bracelet and strap changes without tools in under a minute. Cartier has built a substantial aftermarket of straps and bracelets around this system. A Santos, purchased on the secondary market at a 20% discount from retail, can be configured and reconfigured across leather, rubber, and steel bracelet options, at a cost that does not require returning to the boutique. The practical flexibility of the watch exceeds what the retail price suggests, and at the secondary market price, exceeds it considerably more. For the buyer who wants a Swiss watch with genuine design heritage, competent movement, integrated bracelet, and the flexibility to change its character across different contexts, the Santos at current prices is making an argument that the boutique pricing actively obscures. Number 4. Audemars Piguet Code 11.59. The most expensive shadow in watchmaking. Audemars Piguet spent years and an extraordinary amount of engineering capital building the code 11.59 specifically to answer one question. What does AP make when it is not making the Royal Oak? The answer involved 3 new in-house calibers, the 4302 three-hand automatic, the 4401 integrated chronograph, the 2950 flying tourbillon, a case architecture requiring 12 distinct machining steps to produce, and a design language that was entirely new for the brand. The collection launched at SIHH 2019. By 2026, the steel 3-hand automatic retails at $28,500, following a 7.5% January price increase. According to WatchPro market tracking, Code 11.59 secondary market discounts have widened 21% in the past 12 months. Current market prices for the steel 3-hand cluster between $22,000 and $24,000. A dealer who acquired inventory at 2022 retail is absorbing a real loss in 2026 and calling it a motivated sale. The code 11.59's secondary market problem is not primarily about the watch. It is about what the watch was supposed to replace in the buyer's decision-making. The logic that sustained code 11.59 demand during the bubble years was substitution logic. Buy the alternative AP while you cannot access Royal Oak allocation. When Royal Oak premiums compressed and allocation became more accessible, the urgency to acquire the substitute collapsed simultaneously. The code 11.59 went from being the next best thing to being the thing nobody was rushing to get. What that overlooks is what the code 11.59 actually is, evaluated without the substitution logic. The caliber 4302 is a genuinely impressive in-house movement. The case finishing is executed to AP standards throughout. The dial depth, layers of material creating a three-dimensional quality that photographs cannot fully capture, is something you notice differently after weeks of wearing it than you do in the boutique. At $22,000 to $24,000 on the secondary market, this is an AP movement in an AP case finished to AP standards at a price that Audemars Piguet has not offered a steel sports watch for in the better part of a decade. That is the actual proposition. The dealer selling it is not thinking about any of this. He is thinking about the loss he is about to take and hoping you do not notice. The finishing on the code 11.59 case repays attention in a way that is worth noting explicitly. The case construction involves a round bezel, an octagonal middle case, and an integrated bracelet. Three geometries that transition without visual interruption because of the precision of the machining between them. AP spent years developing the case before launching the collection. Under different lighting conditions and at different angles, the case surfaces interact with light in ways that a photograph does not capture and that a brief boutique visit does not reveal. Collectors who have spent time with the code 11.59 consistently note that the watch reads differently after a month of daily wear than it does at first encounter. That is not a universal quality. Most watches look the same on day 1 and day 300. The code 11.59 accumulates. Whether that quality justifies $28,500 at a boutique is a reasonable question. Whether it is present at $22,000 on the secondary market is a different question with a simpler answer. The code 11.59 also benefits from one of the most generous service programs AP offers. The High-CTR program allows owners to extend warranty coverage and access scheduled maintenance at predictable costs. An AP movement at this price tier will service at intervals of 5 to 7 years for approximately $2,000 to $3,000, a manageable proportion of the watch's current market value. The movement inside is AP's own, with AP's parts supply, AP's watchmakers, and AP's documented service standards. That infrastructure does not differentiate between watches that traded at a premium and watches that traded at a discount. It treats every code 11.59 as an Audemars Piguet, which it is. Number 5. Omega Speedmaster Professional. When 18 configurations replaced one legend. The Omega Speedmaster Professional has been worn on the moon, not in the way that brands claim adjacency to historical events by dressing a celebrity in a watch and calling it an association. Astronauts actually wore it. NASA flight certified it after exhaustive testing. It went to the lunar surface on the wrist of Buzz Aldrin on July 20, 1969, while the movement inside was running correctly under conditions no other watch had been certified to handle. That certification is one of the most verified facts in watchmaking history. The caseback engraving says, "Flight qualified by NASA for all manned space missions." That is not marketing copy. It is accurate. Here is what happened to that watch in the secondary market. In 2021, the Hesalite Speedmaster Professional with caliber 3.861 traded at around $7,000, roughly 25% above its retail price of approximately $6,800.